In this video, I'll show you how to clean and filter your Airbnb data using pivot tables. So here we have a data set for Montreal, Canada. And what I always recommend when I first get a new set of data is to explore it, to look at the different variables and what kind of information falls under each variable. So one way to do that is up at the top here where it says data, make sure I'm on that tab, and I'll click on the filter or this little button that looks like a funnel, and a little triangle will appear next to each of my variables. So I'll look at the different variables to see what I have. And then also if I click on the little triangle, I can see the kinds of data that falls under that particular variable. So you can see under property type in Montreal, there's a wide range of properties available for rent. Another thing I like to do is to see how big my file is. So if I click on column D, because all of our listings will let us know what neighborhood it belongs to, I can look in the bottom right hand corner here and there's a count of all my data points. So it's saying that there are 21,105 lines of data in this column, including the label up at the top. So let's go ahead and create our pivot table because I don't want to use all 21,000 plus data points, because Montreal is a very diverse city. There's different price points in different neighborhoods. And so I'm going to want to filter or narrow down to a particular neighborhood. That way my data doesn't get too skewed one way or another because of everything being analyzed all together. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Insert tab up in the upper left-hand corner. And on the far left, there's a button that says Pivot Table. And then a menu will open and all you have to do is click OK. So a new tab will appear and a shell for a pivot table will show up along with all of the variables from our data set on the last tab. So what I'll do first is take my neighborhood cleansed, and I'm going to click on that and hold it and drag and drop it into the rows box. The rows quadrant here will organize my neighborhoods in alphabetical order for each unique neighborhood it sees in the data. So this way you don't have to manually count and look up all the neighborhoods. The pivot table will just do it for you. I'll also go ahead and click on the neighborhood cleansed again and drag and drop it into the values box over here. The values box will do things to my data. In this case, because neighborhoods are just words, it's categorical data, all Excel can do is count, or in other words, how many Airbnb listings exist for each neighborhood. So we can see our numbers right here in the count. Again, I don't have to count it manually, the pivot table does it for me. One more thing I like to do, especially with this kind of data, is look at price. So if I scroll down here, there's a couple of different pricing options. There's the nightly price, labeled price. There's weekly price and monthly price. So I'm going to just choose the nightly price, and I'll click and hold that down and drag and drop it into the values box because I want Excel to analyze it a bit for me. And you'll notice that when I dropped it in, it turned my data into sum of price. So sum means to add up, and that's not really useful for me because I don't need to add up all of the prices. I'm more interested, say, in the average price. So what you want to do is double click on the sum of price and a little menu will open up and it'll give you some options on how would you like us to calculate your data. In this case, I want the average, and then I'll go ahead and click OK. And now I've got the average price here. It's not the prettiest, it's got a lot of decimals. All you'd have to do is select your data and then under the Home tab, look for the number formatting. And one quick way is just to click the comma style. And that'll put it in accounting format, and it won't be affected, let's say, by currency symbols, whether you've got euros or US dollars or yen or something else. So now with this data, I can start making some decisions about perhaps which neighborhoods I want to work with. And one way to do that, because the data is alphabetical order, is to sort our data. I can sort it by price. So if I click on any of the prices, I can right click, a menu appears, choose sort, and I want to do largest to smallest. For those that might not have a right-click option or might be working in Mac, another way to sort is, again, clicking on any of my data points under average price, go up to the Data tab, and there's a sort option here. If you just hover over it, it'll let you know what kind of sorting it does. In this case, again, I want it largest to smallest. So I'll just click on that. And then now we can see the most expensive neighborhoods in order from largest to smallest. But as you can see, the most expensive neighborhoods don't have a lot of listings, so that might not be as interesting for me. So I'll go ahead and also sort the count of neighborhood. So I'll click on one of these. This time, why don't I do the right click, sort, and largest. And now we can see the neighborhoods with the most listings, and I can still see the average price to the right. In a different video, I show you how to do some charts with this, but if you copy paste your data just over here to the right, you can create bar charts that will display the count or the average price. But remember, whenever you're doing charts, you really just want to keep it simple to like one variable. So I would have a variable for the count, one chart, and then the other variable in a different chart might be the average of price. So I'll go ahead and rename this sheet to count and price, just so I remember when I go back into my file what this table was about. Now, let's say I want to do more pivot tables, and I don't necessarily want to start from scratch, but now I have narrowed down to a neighborhood. So looking at the listings and the price, I really like Villa Marie. So I'm going to highlight that and remind myself I want Villa Marie. So what I can do now is I have two options. I can either go back to my raw data and recreate a pivot table all over again, or I can copy and paste this tab which has a pivot table in it and then just tweak it. So I'm going to go ahead and just demonstrate copying and pasting the tab and tweaking a pivot table so you can see it. And I'll go ahead and right click and choose move or copy. And so I'm making sure I have the correct sheet that I want to duplicate, and then create copy and hit OK. Now, note I have to rename this, so maybe this time around I want to do something related to property types. So I'll go ahead and label it property types, and then I'm going to start tweaking this. So one thing we can do is I'm going to go ahead and remove these values that I put in here. So I'm going to drag and drop neighborhood away and price away, so that again all I have is the neighborhoods in their rows. But as you recall, I narrowed it down to just studying Villa Marie. So if I click on this little triangle here, I can filter and only choose Villa Marie for my data set. So if I deselect the select all button, now these are in alphabetical order, so you can just scroll down to find it, or you can just type in and it will bring up the neighborhood that I want. So I only want Villa Marie, so I'm going to uncheck anything else and then hit OK. So now I just have Villa Marie appearing, and now I want to know the property types. So I'll go ahead and click on property type and drag and drop it into the rows here. That way I can organize my data for Villa Marie by property type. And so you can see all the different property types appear here now. And I can do a count again. So I would just drag and drop the property type in here. I can do price again. So I can take the price and drag and drop it in here. Again, I would turn that into an average. So you can see with a pivot table, you can play around, drag and drop things, see what works, see what doesn't work, and see if it's something useful for you when you want to analyze your data. Now let's say for our property types, I don't need all of these property types and I want to filter even more. If I click on this drop down again, up here at the top, they will let you choose property type, and then you can just pick the ones you want. So I'm going to deselect this, and let's say I only care about apartments. Just looking down. Houses. Maybe townhouses. Right, and then I'll click OK. And then now I have narrowed down to 3 types of properties within Villa Marie. I can see how many exist. I can see how much the average price per night is for each type. So now another cool trick so that we narrow down our data for good analysis, because I've used the pivot table to select the things I'm interested in, Villa Marie and 3 kinds of properties. If I go to the Villa Marie total right here and double click on this, it's now going to draw all of the raw data specifically for Villa Marie and my property types I filtered. So you can double check that by going to the little triangle, and you can see we only have Villa Marie listings. If I go to property type, we can see it only has the apartment, house, and townhouse that I originally chose, but it also has all of the other data to the right pulled in for me. And so this is now raw data specific to, so data for Villa Marie. And now I can do more analysis on this using the data analysis tool pack, which you'll see in a separate video later on. But this is a quick way to pull out the data you want from the original giant data set. So real quick, if we go back to our data just for Villa Marie and I do my highlight of column D, I can now see I've got 3,998 data points, including the label, for analysis versus the 21,000 plus I originally had in the first tab. So if you have any questions, just let me know.